And welcome to the React Show. We got a really fun show today. I think it'll be a really practically useful show. We're going to talk about component libraries and one in particular that we both really like, Chakra UI. So we'll talk about, why we like it, why we think it's better than some of the other ones, what makes it better. So I think it'll be a lot of fun. And, if you're looking to learn something new in a really practical way, I think this will be a great show for you. We're with Owl Creek, high performance React consultancy. And I'm Thomas with my co host, Austin. So, welcome to the show, Austin.
Thank you, Thomas. Good to be here as always.
Definitely. It's always great to have you here. If you have any feedback or questions, we'd love to hear from you. Just, feel free to email us at thereactshow@owlcreek.studio. Let's get into the show. Austin, I thought we'd start with you. What do you like about Chakra UI? Why would you recommend somebody choose it over something else?
Well, like we talked about in a previous episode, we were overviewing Next.js and how Next.js kind of takes all of the pain of setting up a React app and server-side rendering, blah, 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 and it does it all like for you so that you can focus on coding. This is pretty much the same reason I love Chakra UI because a lot of component libraries I've used in the past, you have to really understand how to use their API. It's not very consistent across all the components. There's usually a lot of caveats, but Chakra UI, when I first started using it, I was like, oh, this learning curve with how to like style things is a little like I don't know, but like once I started doing it, I realized like, whoa, this is allowing me to like really develop a lot quicker, and it kind of took all of the mess of like handling a component library out of using a component library and just allowed me to like build my application.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's also, parallels some of my experience with Chakra UI. Although, at that point, I had already been like, yeah, I really want styles as props anyways, and I don't find much value in having a separate, CSS component because what I found in practice was the CSS was really hard to keep in sync with your components. And what usually happened is the CSS just kept building up over the years, and nobody really knew or had a good idea of which CSS code was still used. And so you would go in, add new code, and you'd have to like override other styles, and it just became a mess. With component libraries, I was really excited when some of them would let you use style props, directly on the component, because I'm like, hey, now these won't get, just lost forever and built upon, and it kept it a lot cleaner. So I was really excited about that, but a lot of the other component libraries weren't very consistent in how you could apply styles as props. And I was super excited with Chakra to see that their base component that all the other components are built on have the full suite basically of styles as props. So you could use them everywhere in a very uniform and consistent way.
Yeah, and something that on this topic is if you don't like want to use their like heading or their text component, you can import Chakra from Chakra React components and then do something like chakra.h1, and you can then scaffold out your own DOM elements with access to all of the style props on them. Which is really amazing how much flexibility there is. And like we were talking about, all of those style props are shared across every single component offered by Chakra UI. So once you figure it out for one, you literally there's no like I remember in Material UI, in order to add like a margin bottom to the typography, I was like having to create a box around it to like hold the typography in a box to add the margin to it. Whereas in Chakra UI, you can just add margin bottom MB on everything, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the cases I was thinking of that was really annoying. It's like I had to start adding boxes or whatever around a bunch of other components just to style them, which is completely unnecessary. So it was great to see that Chakra had that. And I also like how you brought up the point that you can extend, um, the Chakra ecosystem in your project with your own components. And I also think that's a critical component to any component library because that's something that you're absolutely going to want to do. So the easier that the system makes it to do that and the more consistent that integration is, the better the library is as a whole. And I think it also makes other people that want to contribute new components and open source them and make them available to you, it makes that process way better. And so I think you end up with a richer ecosystem overall too.
Well, it kind of all stems from one of the other things that we like about Chakra UI is, I'm skipping ahead, is the accessibility. I was looking for like, oh, how can I make a Chakra UI autocomplete component? And I found a issue on the GitHub where they're like really going into depth about, hey, how do we implement this correctly from the beginning if we're going to create one? Because they are creating all of their components based on the HTML versions with accessibility at the forefront. So they're like, well, technically if you're doing a multi-select on a drop down, it's theoretically like a radio the way that like the browsers and screen readers interface with these things. So they're like really taking the time to build upon like the actual basis of everything we do by doing the HTML properly under the hood. So that in itself like allows contributing to the project to be even easier because it's like, okay, we have this like baseline shared understanding of how we're going to create things in this component library, and then it like enforces best practices in the implementation as well.
Yeah, I totally agree again. The attention to detail with accessibility and what that means in terms of implementation is another reason why I love Chakra UI. Um, and I really do appreciate how they're like not taking the approach that a lot of component libraries took, which is just to make an autocomplete that looks and functions for most of us as an autocomplete, but they didn't put the thought and the understanding into its internal developments. And I have worked with a lot of React autocomplete libraries, and I don't like any of them. I think internally they're all not well done. So I'm really excited to see that level of attention to detail and to know that like when they do come up with something, it's almost certainly going to be like well thought out and consistent, accessible, and well done.
Yeah, agreed. Which has been cool too, because in that thread, for example, with the autocompletes, I saw a lot of people who were like trying to put together autocompletes and making their own versions with like using all of the other components available within Chakra UI. So it was like there are ways to implement autocompletes already, and they're able to create actual implementations based on the Chakra UI library, and potentially like you can make your own custom one, and hopefully these will maybe be brought in as we figure out the proper way to do it.
Yeah, well, actually, I have created one in Chakra UI because I needed one, and it was very easy. But the part I didn't like about it is I was not able to put the effort into the accessibility side of it. And at least in this case, we haven't released this component yet, so it's not really an issue. But that's definitely a thing that takes extra effort, a lot of extra effort. Like it was really easy for me to whip up a autocomplete in Chakra UI that I actually think. Okay, I'm not gonna say it's necessarily completely better than every other one, but I like it a lot better than a lot of them, and it was super easy to do.
Right on. Well, I mean, I would love to check out this component you've made. So shoot me that link
Yeah.
afterward because I could use it.
Oh, definitely. It's actually interesting. It's I don't know actually how well I did in separating concerns because it's integrated with a location autocomplete. So it will like you can start typing in a location and it like shows a map of that location once you select one of the autocomplete examples, or you can like drag the map around and it'll reverse geocode it. So yeah, if you need anything like that, definitely let me know.
Well, that's applying best practices of bottom-up programming. You didn't need to separate out the concerns on the first implementation. That you only do that afterwards, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I would love to why I didn't do it is for that reason because I haven't needed it anywhere else yet, and so I'm like, I don't know exactly what I would want the final API to look like, but I could send you this and you could, use your own application of it and we could combine that together maybe to create a more general purpose, bottom up approach to a Chakra UI autocomplete.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah. And if anyone's listening and interested, I'm sure I could get you the code too. So, or maybe I'll just put up a link or something. I don't know. Figure something out.
Yeah, we'll get that up on the. Well, we're actually working on something behind the scenes right now where we're taking all of these best practices that we discuss in the podcast and we're creating a course about it. And the course will come with like a companion, like starter kit product that you can like leverage all of the technology we've talked about, which is already really easy to leverage and implement. And we'll have like a really open-ended framework to build things upon, which we already use internally for our clients. So look for that down the pipeline too. It's a little teaser.
I'm looking for that. When's that coming?
Well, I heard that the first episode of the course got recorded already, so that's pretty. We're making good moves, right?
You might be going a little bit far. I may have recorded a test version of the first one, which was about JSX. So I don't even really know what component you do with that, but yeah,
We're getting there.
yeah,
All right,
uh,
what was on the next? We got the composition effect of everything.
yeah. Did you want to talk about that?
You go first. I
Okay,
have some stuff I would like to add on.
all right, sounds good. Yeah, so another thing that I look for, in general with programming, but especially with like a UI library, is composition. So, how well do the different components fit together? Are the UI are the APIs uniform? That type of thing. And I think because Chakra UI has been based on some solid core base components, it composes super well. So you can sort of adapt, any existing components into new components, like we were just talking about with this geocoding autocomplete. It all fit together really nicely and really easily, and I believe that's because of the uniform design backing Chakra UI makes things really compose well together.
That being said, I going to this like back to the bottom up programming approach. When I like started scaffolding out some of my pages, I started to run in. I got frustrated with the styles as props because I was like, oh, it's so verbose. But I was like, oh, this is actually enforcing me to, now that I'm repeating myself with some of these buttons, for example, that I need to take these out and start creating my own internal library so that I can like really effectively reference the same things and be able to leverage the theming system, which we'll talk about later. So it's really helped me to also change the approach that I'm doing with like in Next.js. It's a page-based system where you create a page and then you like scaffold out your page. And before I was doing like all of the logic, getting all the data, blah 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 in the thing, and then I had this huge Chakra UI component at the bottom. But now I started to abstract that out into like a view system where the views are like built upon the component library, and they just are like kind of dummy views where they just take props. And it's helped me to like really grasp the visual aspect of things by leveraging Chakra UI, breaking out the components, and it's just made me start coding a lot more cleanly, I feel like.
Yeah, I think it was a really good point you brought up about how, initially it might, like, styles as props might feel not good because there's just so much. It feels very verbose compared to maybe CSS, because in CSS you're cascading your style sheets, obviously, and that's not the way it works with style props. But that's also why I like it, for exactly what the reason Austin was saying, which is then you're like, oh, okay, the right way to do this in React would be to create components. And so you end up, I think, not writing more styles than you would have with CSS, as long as you're abstracting your components in a good way. And I think, it's a really good point I hadn't thought of, that it kind of forces you to do that. Otherwise, you're just like, oh, wow, this is just so much work. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and I mean, I used to love CSS, especially Sass, like the way I would like really nice, and I started using like CSS modules to kind of ensure that only certain styles were getting passed to certain things. But then, like, you end up having all these edge cases where you're like doing different screen sizes, or you have like different variants, and you're like cascading new styles and overriding them to make sure that you get like the desired output, right? And since I started like composing my own button, for example, I was able to just put in like use media query functions from the hooks that are provided by Chakra UI to be able to be like, hey, okay, this button, all buttons should do like certain things on certain screen sizes. And then, like, instead of having all these like modifying classes to make it like button primary, button whatever this, I would just pass in a prop where it was like type, for example, and then it would reference like a set of style props. And it was like I could be much more confident that like, okay, I can implement this button on this page with this certain type of button I want to use, and it will render the way I expect it across all screen sizes, versus like having to go back and forth checking and moving around the CSS to make sure it's cascading or being called properly.
Yeah, I think what you're describing, to me, is really why I never liked CSS or Sass that much to begin with, and that's because it is a what I call a discongruous separation of related parts or concerns. So you have a button, and you want to style that button, but you're not really, with CSS, you're not really styling that button exactly usually, unless you're, using really specific like class based or ID based selectors or something. Like, you're not your CSS is kind of potentially styling who knows what. And I think that's where I always disliked that approach. Was it's like, no, I want to scope my styles to specific components, because that's how I work on things. That's how I think about things. My brain doesn't think about like the way the page works as a whole all the time. That's too hard. Like, I want to have all of my things related to a button be scoped to a button, because then it's so much easier to think about and test. And so that's why, like, initially I'm like, oh, CSS, it's so cool. It can like just, it's so powerful. I can apply these styles to so much. But I quickly was like, this is kind of like the wrong way to do it in my head, just because of that separation between what I'm working with and what I'm, trying to do. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
Yeah, completely. I think I liked it a lot because it was like all I knew what how to use. But yeah, I feel like CSS in nature, the way it is
mhm.
it is implemented, it's quite fragmented. things get really fragmented easily, where Chakra UI has allowed me to get rid of that fragmentation and just have everything in one place, easy to know, hey, this is going to affect this, and not have to think about it much. Like I mentioned in the beginning, it's like, oh, I can just add in these props real quick, and it like uniformly does what I expect it to do.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love that. I think that's a great tie-in to the next thing on our notes here, which is the theming and dark mode system. I'll admit, when I first started Chakra UI, back when it was like sort of beta version, it's improved now, but it didn't have great documentation for this. But that meant I dove into the code and actually got to learn how it was implemented to figure out how to use it. And what I found was that it, like the rest of Chakra UI, it was done in a very composable and you know fashion, which this is sort of like a long way of saying, like, I think the theming system is really solid, and the way that, like, well, maybe I should stop talking before I say too much nothing here. Asa, do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, honestly, I am not that well versed in the theming system yet. I'm still operating on the base theme, so I definitely would like your opinion on how to use them.
Yeah, so I'll be honest, I'm still learning my, like, the way that I think is the best way to use it. I'm not an expert at it. It is I think there is a learning curve with it. But what I can say is it seems to be a worthwhile learning curve. It's not a learning curve in terms of like learning boneheaded, APIs that don't make sense. It is a system, and you have to learn that system. And what I've done so far is, in some cases, I've used the theming system to create new variants for like buttons, for example. And once it took a little bit for me to figure out how that works, but once I did, it was super clean and it has worked really well. So I can just, be like, button variant green or whatever, and it'll have certain proper. Actually, what I usually do is, button variant disabled or something, more describing the characteristics of it. But that worked really well, and it was really easy. And you can even sort of mix in, just regular JavaScript to figure out, what the output of the theme will be and stuff, which is really nice. But I've also used it to do like color theming. So if I wanted like the main color for my app to be, based, like I just named it based on the name of the product I was working on. And then you can use Chakra's built-in color system. And so that's like allows you to do different shades of colors. So like red 200, red 400, red 600, and have that apply consistently. Well, Chakra UI lets you redefine that color palette and extend it. So what I would do is extend it with like the name of my product and then have like product.200, product.400. And that would be the main, color I might have. And in the future, if I wanted to go in and change that main color, it's just in one place. And so I really like that flexibility and the fact that it's all put in one location.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. That's pretty much the only real theming stuff I've been playing with, is just how easy it is to like, oh, this button looks a little too dark. I'm gonna change the background color, like, to, instead of green 900, it'll be green like 700. Oh, that looks right. And then like, oh, the color needs to, the white color maybe needs to be different, and so color white dot 900, or just color dot white, or just white, whatever, right?
Yeah.
It allows you to like be pretty granular on a case by case need, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I don't know if this is like, I'm not an expert designer, so maybe this isn't the expert designer's way of doing things, or maybe it is. I have no idea. But I really like that it has this color palette defined for all the major colors and different shades of those colors, because it is just super easy to jump in and start coding things and make it look good really quickly and easily, but also knowing you're not like locking yourself into this. Like with most CSS stuff, it was like, oh, I can change the base color and maybe another color, but like beyond that, it usually turned into a mess. I really like how I can just start coding and be like, okay, a designer can come in later and edit, some of these base things and just have it magically apply everywhere, and I'll be happy and everybody will be happy.
Right. And well, think about in CSS or Sass, like just recently we were able to start defining variables in CSS, and then in Sass we've had that for a while. But like in order to like use those variables, you would have to like scope the CSS or Sass file you're working in,
Yeah.
or like import the variables to be able to use that stuff. Whereas because everything is just passed in through the highest level theme provider, you're good to go. It's accessible throughout every Chakra component you desire.
Yeah, and I think this brings up another thing, another principle that I live by in the programming world, and that is I don't almost ever find it useful to have a restricted language. So that's what CSS started as, is basically a restricted language to let you have cascading style sheets. And then we're like, oh, wow, this is such a pain. We need variables, and we add variables, but it's really hacky and blah, blah, blah. It still doesn't let you. Like, I remember writing these ridiculous mixins in Sass to try to make it do like things that would be really basic in JavaScript. And I was always frustrated. I'm like, why can't I just write in a full regular language? Why am I restricted in what I can do here? And that's a whole nother topic, and there's a lot of other opinions I've gotten on that. But like, I like that part about the system is you can do it all in JavaScript. So anything you could do in JavaScript, you can do for your theming system.
Well, that was like the first experience I had with JS like styles in JavaScript was with Material UI, and the way that you could like write your classes and your CSS there. It like added some leverage to being able to access stuff within JavaScript. You could pass in and do functions a little bit more cleanly. But I still like I really didn't like it. And when Chakra UI, when I was reading the docs, it was like, oh, it leverages CSS and JS. I immediately was like, oh, and then I haven't one time had to write any CSS or any like custom styling like that. But you can still leverage this as well, which is great. But I like the more I've just been using the style props and like creating functions to apply what I need more dynamically, I don't think I'll ever have to write CSS again.
Yeah, I love hearing that. Well, I mean, I don't know if I care if you have to write CSS, but as long as I don't have
Wow, you
to.
don't care.
I'm just kidding.
Thanks, man.
um, yeah, I guess we could also mention it does have built-in dark mode support, which I have used, and the funny thing is, I was like, who cares? But I apparently have my phone set to dark mode just because I don't like bright things shining at me at night, and this if you use Chakra UI and you have dark mode enabled, it'll automatically pick that up and your site will look good in dark mode. And so apparently people like me will be happier. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely a fan. But that's where we kind of go to the next section, right? The stuff that maybe we don't like a whole lot about it, huh?
Yeah, and I like how you sort of said that because it's pretty clear. I probably wrote most of this, but
You definitely have some opinions.
yeah. So um, yeah, I think we have to be honest and say that Chakra UI is not super mature yet compared to some other options. And when I say that, I'm actually kind of lumping all the other React component libraries in that, because to me when I look at a mature component library or widgeting toolkit, as I call them in general, that would be like Qt or GDK or something like that. And if you look at like the API on a button in Qt or GDK, or there's the Microsoft versions, I don't know what they even call them anymore. Mac has a version. Everybody has a. If you look at the APIs on Chakra UI or a lot of the other React component libraries, they're really thin compared to what you would have available on a much more mature system. But as long as the project keeps going, I expect that will fill out. But I think it's something that we definitely should at least mention.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Um,
I mean, we do want everyone to know, like, nothing is perfect, right? And it's good to know what you're getting into, because that's like one of the main themes we talked about when we reviewed Material UI is like anytime you bring in a library, you are like adding some sort of third party complexity to your project, and you no longer have control over certain aspects of it. So yeah, let's get into some of these bashing points that you put together.
Yeah, I think going along, this is just really tied to the maturity is the depth of components available. It's not going to be as deep as something like even Material UI or some of the other React component libraries, and definitely not as deep as what you might be used to if you come from like a desktop background or even a mobile background. And again, I'm hoping that as the project matures and gains, more people working on it, that will improve. But I don't, I think it can be frustrating sometimes when you want something that seems like a really basic component like the autocomplete and it's not there. That can be kind of frustrating. And I think it's pretty easy it can be pretty easy to build your own, but you don't want to do that if you don't have to. So I'm looking forward to that improving, and I don't see any reason why it wouldn't, but I wanted to note it again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's why we're using these libraries to abstract away having to create a lot of your own stuff, so you can create your app, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's a realistic little gripe you have there.
Thanks. Um, so depth of components API, I guess I already talked about that. Did you want to say anything else about any of these, Austin, or?
About the depth of components and the API, yeah, like I haven't run into anything, so I'm trying to really take this whole bottom up approach and keep everything I write in the first iteration really simple to begin with,
Mhm.
and a question, am I even doing the right paradigms? Like, do I need an autocomplete right here? Would that be a nice to have, or like, can I get this done without that? So I haven't like had any like cases where I'm like, man, this like complex use case I've cooked up doesn't isn't supported yet. So I don't have too much experience with these problems.
Yeah, I think part of it is if you haven't been maybe exposed to some of the other possibilities, but like for one example, when preparing for this show, I was looking at like a cute button API, and like they have an API, for masking. They have an API for like every different type of like input you might or sorry, sorry, it wasn't a button, it was an input I was looking at. So they have a different API for like, okay, if we want to only have numbers being input, what type of like I guess what I'm saying is they have like a whole API for like filtering and stuff like that, that is just not doesn't come included with Chakra UI, and maybe it shouldn't, maybe that's a separate library, but like it's not
So
really
like
made for.
validation is part of the UI library in some sense.
I mean, I yeah, that's another topic. I think it doesn't necessarily have to be, but they have to play well together. And that's where like I have like sort of my own Chakra UI components that I've made, and all of the input components I have extended from Chakra UI's version to have built in validation and some of these other features that I would like to see included in the actual base component library. I don't know of like when do you ever use a text input and you don't want to do any sort of processing or validation? I mean, it could happen, but like that's so rare. And right now you have to piece it together, and I think it's a real pain, and I think it could be done better.
Well, I mean, we know how to do this, right? Find a pattern, and when the pattern emerges as a reliable one that extends Chakra UI, yeah, open a PR. I'm sure they would love your input.
Yeah, I would love to. I need ultimately, I think I need a few more of me, or to delegate more. I don't know.
We're working on that. We're working on that.
Yeah. So the
You can
other
see our projects at owlcreek.studio/labs.
really, I didn't even know about that.
No,
Sweet.
that page is a work in progress too.
Oh, okay. Am I
I
working
need to
on that
make
one
more of
too?
me to make what?
Is that why it's
No,
not
my
done yet?
clone.
Oh, your clone.
No, the
Okay.
clone. Yeah, I'm have to make the clone first. And then he'll make the labs page. So it may take a little while.
Well, I hope you get out that because I'm literally looking forward to it.
Yeah, right.
um, yeah, so the other thing I wanted to mention, and I don't even know if Austin would agree with me here, but something I don't like is we'll get into the Chakra UI Pro later and what that is, but it's basically a paid version of Chakra UI. I just wanted to say I don't like the licensing model that they've chosen. I like some aspects of it. I like that you can get a look at the source code and stuff like that. But what I don't like is I feel like it misaligns the Chakra UI development team that's working on both of these projects. I think it misaligns them with the the user base and potential user base. And I say that because the pro licensing model includes a lot of like components that aren't included in the free open source version. And, and I mean, there's, I think probably arguments for why it happened this way. But I like to see a different model where, for example, I'm going to bring up Qt again, and I don't know if they still have this model, but they used to have a model where if you had an open source project or if you weren't distributing the Qt code to users, you could use it for free under an open source license. But if you were a business, you had to pay some money to use the system as a whole. And I liked that because I felt like it aligned with users better. So if you're not somebody with money, you don't have to pay money, but you get access to everything. But if you're somebody with money, presumably, you can pay a little bit of money. And so I feel like that supports the project as well as, you know, making it available to everyone. I don't know. This is something that I'm sure is just debatable, but it's my own minor opinion.
Well, you're allowed to have some opinions. I'll allow that. And I think the one that you bring up is, yeah, it's arguably valid, because there are ways of going about it that may be more aligned. But the thing that is like fortunate is the Chakra UI library, the Pro library. It's not necessarily limiting what components you have access to because they give you access to all of the components in the free version. What it does limit access to is just a bunch of like custom, like not components but like UIs in a way where it's like a combination of many components. So it's not like you couldn't build these yourself just from like looking at the library that they have. You just don't have access to the code. But if you had a little bit of time, you could recreate the whole pro library on your own.
Yeah, so that's all true. That's not really, I guess, what I was saying. I'm more saying like I am concerned that the team will put effort into new components being in the pro version versus in the base free version. And
Right.
That's more my main concern. Maybe that won't happen, but I feel like this type of model could encourage that to happen.
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully not. I mean, it doesn't seem to be that way, but they have definitely created the avenue for that to happen potentially, right?
Yeah. I think we could get into Chakra UI Pro, but that brings up a great point. We never really talked about Chakra UI itself, which the version we've been talking about, the underlying system and a lot of the base components, is free and open source for everyone. I forget exactly the license. I think it's a copyright or not a copyleft license. I think MIT or something. But yeah, so Chakra UI Pro is a paid version, and I don't remember what license that comes with. Do you remember, Austin?
No, I do not. I should probably use look that up because I'm using it quite extensively now, you know.
But anyways, yeah. So I haven't actually used Chakra UI Pro, but Austin has. So, Austin, you're welcome to go ahead and tell us more about it.
Well, I just like on a project I'm working on, I have like a bunch of pages I have to build like that are built on all sorts of templates, right? And I could just like easily, well not that easily create and style all of these big UI elements that I need. For example, like authentication, a blog, or like a pricing page. But they've gone ahead and created like scaffoldings for all of these things so that you can just like pretty much copy and paste over and then modify to fit your like business case. So like I'm creating a dashboard right now for some lead generation management, and I was like, man, I really don't want to have to like create this whole like dashboard page layout scaffolding and figure out how I want to design that, because it's just going to like kind of put me behind like focusing on the wrong thing when I need to focus on this data table searching view. And so I just like, there were like five options for a page layouts, and I was like, oh dang, that's a really nice looking dashboard layout view. And it had just like an empty page for where your content would be. And so I just like popped that in and got coding, and it was like, sure, maybe I didn't have to create that dashboard view right away. I could just created a empty view with the table list and everything. But I know that I'm going to need that view to like go to other views that are connected to this, and so I already like have that up, and it looks really beautiful. And then for example, the way that they recommend creating tables, for example, was like already scaffolded out, and I was able to like really quickly integrate this React data table, I think, or React table hook library into like generating really dynamic and effective tables that looked really nice quite rapidly. So for me, I think like if you're trying to bootstrap up a project and you don't want to like get bogged down with the nuances of creating all these UI flows, um, having access to Chakra Pro is like quite useful. I think it was like 249 and you get lifetime access to it. And I was like, these guys, they're still maturing and creating this thing. They have like a really nice product that's going to save me a ton of time bootstrapping. I'm gonna spend a little money and support them and hope that it continues to grow.
Yeah, that's really cool. I guess to be honest, it just makes me a little bit jealous now because I'm like, yeah, I want tables, I want forms. Yeah, so apparently I gotta shell out some money here, or I've been making them myself, but that costs money
Well,
too.
the
So
the copy I have, I think I bought it under our Owl Creek Studio account. So theoretically, it's a business license, maybe. I don't know.
oh yeah, I
Need
mean
to look into that licensing stuff.
yeah, I think we would need to do that first, but yeah, it sounds great. I really like what they have there. I like that it's available. Yeah, it looks good. I will probably try it out at some point. But yeah, thanks for that overview. I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to say in conclusion about Chakra UI Pro. Otherwise, we can move on.
Well, right now they have two like separate kind of designations of what component, like what UIs are available. They have application UI and then they have a marketing one. So like the application UI comes with stuff like your an authentication forms, headers, footers, page shells, tables, like grid systeming, all of these basic things that you need to scaffold out your UI. And then they have a second one called marketing, which has everything you could imagine for your marketing effort. Like it has a blog page, a blog post page. It has like features, heroes, call to actions, pricing, signups, testimonials, all sorts of stuff related to that. And they're actually working on a third one right now called e-commerce. So they're going to bring in all of the store-based components. So like if you're creating a startup or any project, like you literally with this pro library you can just rapidly scale out your project, even if it's just like in a prototype visual using Chakra UI at first, and then like you can focus solely on getting your business logic running. And then not everything has to look like Chakra UI. Like it comes with a really beautiful basic theme that they've created, but you can easily modify and extend the theme like we talked about earlier and really make Chakra UI your own brand.
Yeah, that sounds great. I was just looking at some of these components some more, and it looks like it's more like form layouts. It's just the components again, not the actual like validation or anything. Is that true?
Yeah, it's true. It's strictly just visual components with no other logic.
Okay, yeah. I mean that sounds like the most generic. Yeah, I gotta check this out more. That looks pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty generic, sure, and I think that's fine because like I know when I've like gotten like created like a you get like create like for example like Gatsby. I never liked Gatsby because like I'll we don't have to go into that, but there was like an example to like make a blog with Gatsby, and I created it based off that template, and the template was just like in order to even use the template, it was just like, oh man, I don't want to understand how all of this works. There's just so much going on just to like do some blog post. And like with this, it's just like, hey, here's just like the visualization of what a blog post is. Now you're free to integrate it with however you have set up, right? So it's like they're everything they offer are like nice bite-sized chunks to be able to implement rapidly instead of getting bogged down and trying to figure out what you're working with.
Yeah, I think that's good. And when I said generic, I definitely meant that in a good way of like, yeah, that it would be applicable to a lot of people because they haven't made a lot of decisions for them, I think.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I think unless you have anything else, Austin, that would bring us to the end of our show.
Yeah, I mean, I just do want to make a disclaimer. Like, we're not affiliated with Chakra UI in any way. Like, we're not getting a kickback for doing this. We really just are overviewing, like we said, with Next.js, not affiliated with them either. We just use this technology ourselves and have had really good experiences. And I don't think we would recommend anything on our podcast unless we like actually used it ourselves and actually recommended it. So that's the reason why we did this podcast today. And we would love if you're using Chakra UI or have had like good experiences or bad experiences with it. Yeah, reach out at the React Show at owlcreek.studio. We'd love your feedback, opinions, or just drop in and drop a line.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, just to back up what Austin was saying. Yeah, no affiliation with Chakra UI. I actually just was I don't know, quite a while ago now, talking on Twitter. I didn't even know it, with the creator of Chakra UI, and I was more just like, oh, they seem like they know what they're doing or whatever, you know. So I went to check it out. I don't know if it was an alpha or beta. It was a long time ago, and I was just like, yeah, this seems like the system I would want to work in. And so I have done a number of projects with it now, and other than the things, we talked about earlier, I am generally very happy with it. So yeah, we just thought we would share that with all of you. And, if you know of another component library we should check out, or one you like better, especially, or, if you have other criticisms, I would definitely love to hear that, because, I love to argue about those kinds of things, or to learn more and learn about something better. Absolutely. And I'm sure Austin would as well. So yeah, let us know. And yeah, so that brings us to a close today. It's been a lot of fun with having you on the show, Austin, and bringing this to everyone else. We will be back soon with the next episode. And, like we already mentioned, shoot us an email at thereactshow@owlcreek.studio if you have any questions, feedback. And I'll also mention that, yes, we do have a, consulting firm behind, a lot of what we do. And so if you're looking for, maybe some consultation on a component library, or, building one out, or that, using one, that type of thing, definitely let us know as well. Yeah, so that will be our show today. And once again, good having you, Austin. We'll see you all later.